Hello, my dear friends. It is welcome to see you. In case we haven't met before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to interview interesting people. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at Adventure Module HHQ4, Cleric's Challenge. Written for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, this is part of the Challenge series, where each of the 4 main classes were given a module dedicated to highlighting what makes them special, and designed for a single player character of levels 2 to 4, and their Dungeon Master to give the PC a time to shine and earn XP on a solo or side quest. Single player modules are rare, but not unheard of in the history of Dungeons & Dragons, and I like adventures that try something different. I've been wanting to review all 4 entries of the Challenge series for months now, so I'm going to go on a tear and knock them all out over the next 4 weeks. First published in 1993 by original D&D publisher TSR, Cleric's Challenge is a chilling Night of the Living Dead scenario with well-written NPCs. It plays to the Cleric or Specialty Priest class perfectly, and has an interesting big bad. Let's see how it sells itself on the back cover, which at the time was pretty much all any of us had to go on. Palmville is a sleepy little town that seems like a good place to stay for the night. That is, until the town's dead rise from their graves and begin terrorizing the village. Ancient evil threatens to overwhelm the good folk of Palmville unless someone can find a way to comfort the restless dead. Okay. A lone player character cleric will have to be clever, courageous, and more than a little lucky to solve the mystery and save Palmville from the mindless zombies that threaten it. Cleric's Challenge is a special one-on-one Advanced Dungeons & Dragons adventure designed for a dungeon master and 1 player. Perfect for very small playing groups, for those times when the whole group can't get together, or for the player who wants his or her character to earn some extra experience. That all sounds great, but is it good? Just because a product has good elements doesn't mean it comes together in the end. It could still turn out bad. Before we drill into the adventure details, let's start with the credits page and get an idea of if we're in good hands or not. Starting with top billing, the module is written by L. Richard Baker, who is often credited just as Richard Baker in his future works. A Navy veteran, he joined TSR in 1991 and worked as a game designer and later a novelist for their line of fantasy novels. You're about to understand my sense of trepidation about how good this module is going to be, because his list of credits reads like a best of times and the worst of times hit list. Baker co-designed the 2nd edition campaign setting Birthright with Colin McComb, which won a 1995 Origins Award despite being crap. The art was muddy, the setting derivative, and the battle and domain management systems at its core were clunky and not an improvement over basic D&D's rule cyclopedia. He oversaw development of the 2nd edition Player's Options series, which as someone who paid money for at least one of those books when they came out, I can tell you was also crap. After TSR went bankrupt and got bought by Wizards of the Coast, he continued working on D&D 3rd and 4th editions, and he led the team that changed D&D settings and cosmology for 4E, changes that were so universally panned even 5E retconned almost every change made. However, he also co-designed the alternative sci-fi game with Bill Slavicsek, which was generally well regarded, if not a commercial hit. I enjoyed his 2E Dark Sun work, and he also wrote the classic adventures The Forge of Fury, co-authored The Red Hand of Doom, and this little thing he helped make called The Lost Mine of Phandelver. He is now a senior writer for The Elder Scrolls Online, which is massively popular and generally good stuff. So we'll see by the end of the episode which Baker we get here. Editor Andrew Shub, I could not find anything on, but the cover art is by one of the greatest fantasy illustrators of all time, Larry Elmore, and I do have a story to go with this particular piece. At GaryCon 2019, Larry held a talk about his life, his work, and inspirations. Larry told us about the chief struggle of an artist to translate the image in their minds as accurately as possible to the canvas. Of all the works he had ever done, Larry said this cover was the most true translation from his mind's eye to his brush. So at least the cover is an inspired work. The interior artists were evocative, but to my eyes the images were too dark to really stand out. And unless you look closely, it can be hard to tell exactly what you're looking at. But they are creepy and atmospheric, which is going to be perfect for this adventure. Fortunately, the maps by John Knecht were excellent and easy to read. Beyond this background information, we march straight into spoiler territory. So if you don't want spoilers for a 30-year-old game, send this to your dungeon master and ask him to run it for you. Or better yet, plow ahead and become inspired to run it yourself, with the help of advice I can offer as someone who has run this adventure several times and streamlined the experience. Starting with the premise that this adventure is designed for a single player and their DM, Baker does provide guidance for including more PCs and other classes, and how to adjust the material. The main item to change is the number of NPC allies the cleric can rally to their cause in the adventure, because the module is written with the expectation that the cleric will recruit NPCs to help tackle the challenges. While that expectation isn't ideal for a solo adventure in general, because the common perception is that the adventure will be balanced for a single player character to take on, it does fit for the cleric class, and hear me out. Based on real-world priests and crusader orders, the cleric is the mouthpiece of their god, and as such should be involved with the NPCs and societies around them. One thing I commonly see ignored by players and DMs is that clerics are people of such intense faith and devotion that the gods themselves listen to what they have to say and provide miracles in answer to their prayers. Bear in mind, most D&D settings have priests of religions that are 0th level, and the gods don't listen to them. They don't grant miracles in answer to their prayers. So the cleric player character or non-player character is a paragon of their religion. They are the equals of Christian saints that endure great challenges and perform works mortal hands are simply incapable of without the help of the divine. People directly tied to the divine like this absolutely should be evangelists to the world to win converts, serve the faithful, and enact the will of their God in the setting. And that counts for the real world too. Gods don't have to answer any prayers, but they choose to answer the prayers of these cleric characters because they believe that the clerics in fact are going to propagate their faith and enact their will into the world, furthering their interests. What I usually see out of player character clerics is a character who's cut off from everyone around them, doesn't have any place in society, doesn't even know that there's a religious hierarchy they're supposed to fit into, doesn't evangelize, and they generally don't have a clue who their god actually is or what they want. They only see him as a source of cued powers that they can have for their character. It may surprise some of you that beyond the name of the god that's printed in the back of the 5th edition player's handbook, which is inexcusable because almost every deity you can find in a published setting has a lengthy write-up. Some of them even have novel series dedicated to them. There's plenty to know about these gods. So if you're gonna play a cleric, I encourage you to put in the effort and just read at least the simple write-up and dig a little deeper, if you've got the time and the resources, to see what your character's deity is really about, what they want, and role play like that matters to your character. It will deepen your sense of immersion in the role that you selected, which will make your character more memorable. And the chances of you forging real memories with this character, they're going to go way up. So if you understand the social roles that clerics and priests have to play, it makes complete sense that this module would expect them to work their social prestige, to recruit and organize the townsfolk against the evil that arises against them on the first night. The adventure opens with this flavor text. You have spent the day traveling through the rolling hills and farmlands of Vascogne, a peaceful region that has been settled for generations. You have passed through this area on several occasions in your career. The gray skies and chilling showers of early spring have been with you all day, and you're looking forward to a hot meal and a warm bed. You're following an ancient road known as the Stone Way. As darkness falls, you find yourself descending through a wooded valley towards the ford of the River Volar and the small town of Palmville. You are tired and cold, and it's a good time to stop. The Volar is cold and swift, and you lead your horse across the ford and into the town. Palmville is a prosperous village, and you can see stores and cottages to either side of the road. A steep wooded hill rises above the town, hiding ivy-grown ruins on its crown. You spy the welcome light of an inn, with the sign of a green griffin proudly displayed. Few people are out and about, but from inside the inn you can hear voices and conversation and the clink and clatter of dishes. While the module doesn't provide a single reason for the cleric to arrive in the village of Palmville, it gives the DM a few ideas they could use, but whatever the reason, they will make it into town and shack up at the inn for the night. All is quiet and calm in Palmville when they arrive, and the player will have a chance to mingle, get to know the locals, explore a bit, and find out bits of local history that will come into play very, very soon. The NPC and location write-ups are really good, and Baker does an excellent job of succinctly getting across key personality details. Many NPC allies have some ass to them, like a 3rd level ranger, a 5th level thief, and more. Going by the map, the town is split in two by the river and has an improved road for the trade routes that run through town. It has all the shops you need, an impressive manor that can be fortified if needed, the town church with a graveyard, a new graveyard with more room to expand, a wizard's tower, and atop the hill overlooking the town is the ruins of a long-destroyed civilization brought low by a holy cleric that destroyed the wicked high priest that threatened the world. The NPC details, the town layout, and local history could be helpful research, but the module does not force the player into it. All that research exists to reward the player's initiative. However, that night, while the cleric is asleep in their bed, their door comes crashing in, smashed open by a shadow-cloaked figure in the dark. I love this flavor text. You are awakened by screams in the distance. Who doesn't love that? Being awakened by screams in the distance. Sitting up in bed, you listen, and for a moment all you hear is the moaning of the wind and the rustling of leaves. Then there is a piercing shriek from the hallway, and something thumps and fumbles at your door. You spring to your feet just as the door gives way. In the darkness, you can make out a horrible, shambling form that advances on you, claws outstretched. Your stomach turns at the stink of the thing in your room. The cleric and everyone staying in the inn, both travelers and the innkeeper's families, are being attacked by zombies. With only their bedclothes and whatever they can grab, the cleric has to fight for their own survival. Not only their life is in the balance, but if the cleric takes too long to intervene, the zombies will kill one by one the other residents in the inn, including the innkeeper, his wife, his kids, and one of the most powerful NPC allies you can recruit can be murdered as he sleeps. Assuming the cleric defeats the zombies, they and the surviving NPCs will no doubt be wondering what the heck happened. But a key detail comes from the text. As the last of the horrid things fall, George blanches and cries out in despair, "That was my uncle! And there's Reginald the farmer. They were buried years ago." The survivors turn away, horrified by the grisly scene. Suddenly, you hear a whinny of terror from the inn's courtyard. George dashes past you to the window and looks outside. "The town! The dead are walking! There must be hundreds of them." That's right. The recent dead have risen from their graves and are attacking the town. From there, the cleric can lead NPC volunteers to help the town, or they can shelter in the inn until the mayor leads a band of locals to the inn, where she asks for the cleric's help in getting townsfolk to the church, where they hope holy ground will protect them. If the cleric doesn't head immediately toward the church, they will see zombies dragging off unconscious villagers towards the new graveyard. If they investigate, they are greeted by a scene of horror. The zombies' trail is not hard to follow. Tatters of clothing and splatters of blood clearly show their path. They drag their victims north along Palmville's main road and turned off at a winding lane that leads into the woods. Your companions tell you that the path goes to the cemetery. As you approach, you can make out an eerie witch light pulsing over the graveyard. The eldritch foxfire ablaze on the cold stones and silhouettes, a macabre scene. 10 zombies are standing in a circle in the graveyard's center, clutching 5 villagers in their filthy hands. In the middle of the ring, a tall and well-preserved zombie stands with its hands locked around the head of a shrieking villager. Evil light burns like green fire in the zombie's eyes, and with a moan of hellish pleasure, it drains the life from the hapless farmer, whose ash-gray corpse tumbles to the ground. The other zombies drag a fresh victim before the creature in the center of the ring. When they finally head to the church, it turns out Baker doesn't buy into the consecrated ground theory, because he wrote up a dramatic siege scene where the cleric and 6 defenders have to fight off 40 zombies and 2 juju zombies, who can only be harmed by magic weapons, by the way, or else the townsfolk inside will be massacred. Once the horde is fended off, the module tells us that at just that moment, the first sliver of dawn comes over the horizon, and the zombies still in the streets can be seen shuffling back to the new graveyard. That takes us to the section called Aftermath, where the townsfolk ask the cleric to help them find out why this happened and stop the undead terrorism from happening again. The PC can recruit more allies, investigate the graveyard the zombies emerged from and return to, and the module leaves it open for the cleric to proceed how they see fit. Baker does point out that the undead will return every night until the big bad is destroyed, even zombies destroyed on a previous evening. While the villagers will be better prepared for the attack and fewer will die, the zombies will begin ranging further afield in search of prey. Unless handled quickly, this will become a regional problem, not just a local one. If the PC doesn't know where to start, needs a nudge in the right direction, or is greedy enough to ask for a reward, the mayor can come by and do all that. Good people to talk to include the elderly priest Montrell, his old friend Reginald and his wizard's tower, and there's a choice bit of info the DM can give to any NPC to help the player assemble a picture of what happened. In the local church, Montrell has a library whose historical tomes can identify the cause of the problem. Most people here don't know it, but the place has an evil history. About 200 years ago, it was a powerful evil temple that was destroyed by the king's men. The ruins seemed harmless enough, but I suppose that maybe Giles and his friends disturbed something that should have been left alone. And there's a collection of texts and scrolls concerning the history of the area, and they do take a few hours to read through, but they can reveal quite a bit of disturbing information, such as those couple centuries ago, a Bishop Astara Trueheart, a leader of a good and victorious army, set his seal upon the crypt of the high priest Nedrazar, who had attempted to achieve lichdom, failed, but instead became an eternal undead evil that was, until recently, trapped in the crypt, and is likely the cause of all those zombies coming up. And while the module doesn't explicitly say this, I provide that if the cleric goes and investigates the library, they get access to the history that's on page 3, which is some really good stuff. But I would also expand it to include the details from page 2, which is key for understanding who the big bad is and why this is all happening. Otherwise, the most interesting part of the backstory will never get to the only person who matters, the player. To boil it all down, Nedrazar, the evil high priest of the now-ruined temple, had amassed wicked allies in the region and was a threat to everyone, whether they were on his side or not. He attempted to become a lich but failed, and with his soul trapped and him no longer able to guide his priesthood, the temple fell to infighting. With the dread priesthood weakened, Bishop Astara Trueheart led the forces of a nearby good kingdom against the temple and destroyed it. Unfortunately, unable to destroy the failed lich's spirit, he sealed the tomb with a holy rod and consecrated the grounds. Years passed, and the people slowly forgot the horror that once ruled this land. From atop his tower, Reginald was an eyewitness to what happened in the graveyard and could tell the cleric that incredibly powerful magic animated the dead and can describe for them the life-draining zombie in the graveyard last night if the PC did not see it for themselves. Finally, any villager can provide this helpful clue. A few days ago, a priest named Giles came through with a few of his associates. They went poking around inside the ruins atop the hill and then rode off the next day without any word to the villagers that they had found anything. It seems like they did find something, but nobody yet knows what. This suggests the PC should explore the graveyard and the ruins. In the graveyard, the cleric will see evidence consistent with every corpse in here rising from their graves, with earth removed, coffins splintered open, mausoleum doors ripped off, and stone lids shoved off their sarcophagi. Eventually, the player can find a crypt with a secret door that leads into the evil temple beneath the ruins, and the way is guarded by the big bad sorcery, and he will try to trap the player and his allies in with animated skeletons of temple guards to attempt to end their lives. If the PC explores the ruins first, he will find a few weathered stones and broken walls covered in ivy, but also signs of an excavation that Giles and his crew made and hastily abandoned. Their digging did lead them to a set of stairs that also led into the dark temple. However, the cleric gets into the temple. There's a variety of rooms with traps and enemies, but we're only going to look at the most important ones. Beyond a guard chamber protected by 2 ogre zombies that do 46 damage per hit. That's right, a single hit from one of these things can pancake the cleric and all but 2 of the most powerful NPC allies you can recruit. We find a prison and torture room, which is littered with fresh corpses. The sole inhabitant of one of the prison cells is a captured farmer, who the big bad intends to soul suck later or use for a trap. The lower shrine is the main worship area that the cleric can find without locating a secret door, and Baker gives us this description. The double doors leading to this chamber are propped open by a shiny new helmet. Inside you see a large room with deep niches along the walls and a dark altar at the far end. The floor is tiled with a mosaic depicting the coiled serpent or dragon emblem of the old temple. Overhead, a groined vault supports a ceiling 20 feet above the floor. The niches contain grotesque statues of horrifying creatures with fang-filled maws and vicious spikes. The altar sits on a raised dais and is decorated with sinister carvings and human skulls. Flanking the altar are 2 iron braziers. In the corner of this evil shrine stand 2 taller statues of dark, armor-clad warriors. The mosaic on the floor will shock any good-aligned character that sets foot on it for 1d4 damage, and if anyone approaches the altar without making the proper obeisances, which could be found in a scroll in another room, 4 shadows will emerge from the 4 skulls and attack the person who triggered them. Bear in mind, they can only be hit by magic items and do both damage and drain strength. 4 of them on a solo cleric or a low-level cleric with backup is tough business. Now, if the PC survives and looks carefully, they will find hidden treasure that is stacked with gems. Powerful cleric scrolls, which can be a big boon in the rest of the dungeon, and a ring of protection +2, which everyone would love to have. Those are the high points for this floor of the dungeon, and we've run into a problem now. The most important part of the dungeon is behind a secret door at the back of the lower shrine. If the cleric fails their secret door check, that's it. Maybe you like the kind of challenge where the dice dictate everything, but I don't like something so important to the adventure being locked behind a simple dice roll. Now, if you're okay with potentially dragging on the adventure for several more nights, and bear in mind that the village is going to get attacked every night, that the big bad isn't defeated permanently, you're good. But you also have to hope at some point that the cleric is going to succeed at that roll, find the door, and get inside. Now, I've tackled this in two ways when I've ran it. One, I moved the big bad into this room and just eliminated the lower floor altogether. And two, I made it really clear that there is a secret door, and it was just up to the player to figure out how to get into it. However the PCs make it through the secret door, they will descend a staircase into the black chamber. The secret staircase from the altar winds down through solid rock, descending about 30 feet further into the cairn. It emerges in a dark chamber of polished black granite. Directly ahead of you is a large double door, emblazoned with the coiled serpent seal you've seen elsewhere in the ruins. Beside the door, a series of soft glowing words are cut into the rock. On your left and right, a couple of smaller doors lead back towards the north. The room is unnaturally cold. Your breath hangs in the air, and you can't suppress a wave of shivering that strikes you. And the door to the south is trapped in the same manner as the mosaic in the upper temple. And the words that are glowing were placed by the door by Bishop Astara as a warning, reading, "In this year, the 317th of the realm, I set my seal upon the crypt beyond this door. Evil slumbers within. Toward the realm I have placed my stave over the tomb. Let no person disturb it. Heed this, my warning." Down here we have the old temple vault, the evil priest's crypt, and Nedrazar's sarcophagus. Starting with the vault, it appears as though this place has been recently ransacked, so the coinage available inside is small, but there are still a few gems and a periapta-proof against poison in a hidden compartment. That's fine and all, but who ransacked it? The door has two sturdy locks that still have to be picked in order to get inside. If Giles and his crew did it, am I really expected to believe that after looting the place, they locked it behind them? Really. There's also a pit trap in the hallway leading to it, and none of his group fell in, leaving signs there might be trouble in the hallway. I don't buy it. Now, I like the priest's crypt, which is filled with chests, stone tombs, and 4 pale and haggard adventurers who look like they've had their asses beat. While they will ask for the PC's help and try to lure him into striking range, it is a deception. These are, in fact, 4 polymorph Hoikuvas, murdered priests who used to serve Nedrazar on his failed road to lichdom, recently freed from their captivity by that idiot Giles. They can only be harmed by silver or magic, so they will surely murder a lone cleric. Finally, we have Nedrazar's crypt. In the center of this room lies a massive stone sarcophagus on a raised dais. The chamber has a high vaulted ceiling of dark granite, and 4 braziers in the corners burn with a smokeless green flame that casts evil shadows throughout the chamber. Across the room, you see a shelf or small altar with a skull made of pure crystal resting on it. The walls and floor are bare of any decoration, and the air is as cold in here as it was in the chamber outside. The green light of the torches dances in the eyes of the crystalline skull. Stepping closer, you see that the sarcophagus in the room's center is encircled by a protective circle of runes cut into the stone floor. That crystal skull is Nedrazar's phylactery, and he can hop into any corpse within 1 mile and turn it into a wight. That's right, a level-draining wight only hurt by silver or magic weapons. And he can do that an unlimited amount of times. A creature that drains 1 level per hit in an adventure designed for a single cleric leveled 2 to 4. Ouch. As long as a crystal skull is intact, he can also animate dead at will with a range of 1 mile, and after the cleric makes it into his tomb, he will start summoning wave after wave of zombies and skeletons to his side at the rate of 1d4 each every other round. That adds up fast. The skull allows him to do more things than that, but Nedrazar's own body is in the sarcophagus that will blind anybody opening it for 99 days on a failed saving throw. If the skull is destroyed by a magic weapon, his soul is forced back into his body. While he can no longer possess any corpse he wants, this form is a beast in combat. He has bracers of defense armor class 3, which in 5e terms gives him an AC of 17, and a gilded mace plus 3 to match the jeweled mitre sitting on his pretty little head. My man's is clad in gold, and at will can cast command, darkness, cause fear, and more. Once per day, he can cause serious wounds, dispel magic, and glyph of warding. Only able to be harmed by silver magic weapons, he also drains levels. Oh, and his unarmed strike does 1d12 damage too. He can jack you in the jaw as hard as a heavy 2-handed weapon and pull your soul out at the same time. So the module intends for the PC to go in the dungeon and defeat the undead in this failed lich. The only problem with that is the big bad doesn't stay dead just by beating the hit points out of him. The only way to destroy Nedrazar is to smash the skull, destroy his real body, and restore the warding circle around his tomb with him in it to keep him from possessing another body. Or you can trap him by shoving him in the circle and restoring it with a star's holy rod. If a problem stuck out to you in those two methods, namely that you need this holy rod to permanently defeat Nedrazar, you would be correct. That is a problem. We haven't talked about where your player finds the rod because Baker wrote that Giles stole it and ran away, so it isn't here. So the only way to defeat Nedrazar and his undead menace is to go on a fetch quest and bring back the magic rod that was containing him all these years. Here though, Baker gets wishy-washy and apparently couldn't decide which way he wanted to go with it. One option has you go to a neighboring town, find Giles and his company, and cajole him into giving it back to you because he doesn't want to, and you can't just entreat on him being a decent person. He is a grave robber after all. Another option has the cleric go to this Lamia's tower and defeat her and her charmed bandit bodyguards for it. With the rod in hand, the PC has to go back into the dungeon, defeat Nedrazar again, and then use the rod to close up shop. The end. The adventure concludes with a nice XP bonus and says the village is grateful and offers the PC a substantial reward for help in their hour of need. What that reward is, the module doesn't say, which isn't helpful. One possibility that the module raises that I did like is that the PC may take over from the elderly priest Montrell as the new parish priest for the town. This is an opportunity for the cleric to earn their place in society and assume a leadership role therein with respect and responsibility over the village that they just helped save, and that already thinks of them as a hero. Could be a wonderful role-playing opportunity and really help lean into the domain building experience that some versions of D&D encouraged. But now for my list of complaints. The fetch quest for the rod feels unnecessary and anticlimactic. By the time it comes up, the cleric will already have had one knockdown drag-out fight with Nedrazar and his horde. And this guy can bring the hurt, believe me. The last time I ran this, on his very first swing after stepping out of his sarcophagus, Nedrazar swung his gilded mace straight at the cleric's head and rolled a nat 20, which in my game doubles the total damage that you dealt, just crushing his skull right in. Now, if the cleric defeats him the first time, Nedrazar comes back in a diminished capacity, so it kind of feels like beating up on a guy that you've already crippled. And also remember that every night Nedrazar survives, the dead rise and assault the town, so more and more townsfolk will be killed. The rod fetch quest does not add anything of worth to the adventure, no dramatic tension or reward to the module. As a matter of fact, it costs the cleric either resources or gold to get it back, but rather it just drags it out, perhaps to meet a page count requirement. So it might have been the padding that it feels like. And that final dungeon is way too much for a low-level cleric and a couple NPC helpers to survive, so I cut a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, in one run-through I tossed out an entire level of the dungeon, and in both run-throughs I cut the number of monsters. If the cleric recruits every possible person in town, then it's doable, I'm sure of it. But that brings another problem I've seen others express. This means more work for the DM. These are non-player characters, so not only does the DM have to run the monsters, have to interpret what the player is doing, but then they have to run this stack of NPCs. So the fights quickly devolve into the DM rolling a bunch of attacks against himself, and the player gets in now and then for a word edgewise. And these won't be the most simple people to run because most of the allies that you can recruit have character levels. So you could have a player run all the NPCs, but this module is part of a series that's designed for a single player character and the DM to run through. If the only way to survive the module is for the single player character to assemble a band of non-player characters around them, why not just have the rest of their regular party come along with them? The first night's church siege ends with the coming of dawn, meaning a new day has arrived. Well, the cleric didn't get a full night's sleep and now can't because it's daytime and has to make the choice between sleeping well past noon and not helping the town recover and take stock so he can get his spells back, or he has to do without them and press ahead. Sure, it can increase dramatic tension, but my bet is most players won't be happy with the tough choice. Some might enjoy the challenge, but they will no doubt head into that lethal dungeon without their full complement of spells and HP, especially with the entitlement mentality of 5e players getting everything lost back on a power nap. Read the room and proceed accordingly. This is a story-driven adventure where unfolding events strongly suggest the path the cleric is to follow, but doesn't mandate the player do things in order of X, Y, then Z, which is great. I like adventures written that way. However, that also means there's a lot of text dedicated to people and places the cleric may not have a reason to ever go to. It's better to have extra details ready than not, in case the player goes in a direction the story didn't suggest, but that does mean there's more text for the DM to sift through to find the info they actually do need. This isn't a real flaw, but I wanted to point out the approach the module takes, since we had previously talked about location-based adventures, touched on railroad adventures, and this happy medium. On a good note, this module gets into the action fairly quickly. As we're going to see in some of the other examples in the challenge series, some will bore you to tears before you ever actually get to the action of what the character is supposed to be doing. But that is not the case here. It hooked me early, and it had me eager to see what all was going to happen in the Cleric's Challenge. I ran this twice within the past 6 years, once in 5e as an intro to Curse of Strahd replacing Death House, and once as a standalone 2nd edition adventure. Both times I adapted it into a real-world historical setting, first putting it in northern Transylvania and then in Latvia, both around 1750 AD, so firearms were available and did get used. I had more than one PC in each iteration, with the Transylvanian crew being 3 PCs and the Latvian crew being 2 PCs plus a guard dog. The Transylvania party didn't even have a cleric, and the 3 journeyed to that village for their own reasons. One was in search of his father, who had gone missing in the area, but left behind a cryptic journal. One was a noble from a neighboring province, and after the attack on the inn that they were staying in, decided that they had to stick around to make sure that this did not spread. And the third one, unfortunately, decided to play a drunken master monk, so there's no idea what they were doing here or why, but they came and went from the sessions, wasn't really missed, wasn't really that important. The Latvian version had a Catholic priest fresh from exorcism school traveling to Palmville to serve as an assistant to the new head priest that was going to be replacing Father Montrell. And the other player was a professional soldier hired by the church to escort that exorcist to the town and make sure he got there okay. We kept forgetting that the cleric had bought a guard dog, so for 2 sessions he just wasn't there. But when I finally remembered to make him show up, I gave him a neck barrel a la a St. Bernard filled with brandy that I said worked like a healing potion, because spirits. And just so you know, while the cleric had his brain scrambled, the dog lived. The soldier also lived, and as a sole surviving savior of the town, and with their own mayor murdered along the way, the villagers asked him to stay on and be their new protector, and so elected him mayor, which he did. Now, both times, I beefed up the opening combat at the inn, and besides just having the zombies break into their individual rooms, I had hordes of zombies come at the inn itself, trying to sneak in through the door, through the cellar, through the windows. So the players had to engage in kind of a castle defense encounter that really kept them on edge. It worked out amazingly. Second, I eliminated the fetch quest for the rod altogether. If I did have a rod, I put it in one of the rooms of the shrine itself, assuming that Giles and his crew had dropped it on their hasty retreat. And I cut the number of the enemies in the dungeon by about half. If you cut the fetch quest for the rod, this is a small area to adventure in, and it's very manageable because the whole town is a few hundred yards from one end to the other. And the module is packed with treasure, so much that a single cleric will be able to outfit an elite personal bodyguard and pay them very well if they survive through this thing. Now, I did not see where anybody else had reviewed any of the challenge series on YouTube or Rumble, so I'm going to fix that with this 4-week run of the challenge series. And in the future, I'll be doing the part 2s. Cleric's Challenge is available on DriveThruRPG as a PDF, but Wizards of the Coast, who just laid off a bunch of people to save their executive bonuses after spending 2023 saying fuck you to their customer base again and again, has a disclaimer at the bottom calling the people who made this module racist, sexist, bigot, homophobes. So if I were you, I would help them stick to their guns and hold the moral high ground by not giving them money. There are plenty of places to find the PDF online without making Wizards sin by accepting these bigot dollars. So maybe look for an archive.org. Maybe you can find it for free somewhere. And that is the thing I think about. If I can buy something somewhere where the original creators get any part of that money, I absolutely do it, no questions asked. But if a corporation that actively hates people who are me and who look like me and want us out of their hobby as soon as humanly possible, and most Wizards bigwigs have said things like that publicly, I'm not putting any words in their mouths, then maybe I won't give them my money. But overall, I like this thing. I like how it emphasized the social aspect of the cleric or specialty priest role. It really showcased Turn Undead, which in 2nd edition you could do again and again and again, not like in 5th edition where you get your one-channel divinity and then you're screwed. Because there's hardly a fight where you can't use that power. It's generally well written. It needed a little bit of work to make it into the adventure that I wanted to run. Have you played in this module, or have you ran it yourself? If so, I would love to hear how that went in the comments, so please let us know. If you enjoyed this review of Cleric's Challenge, I do enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so we can both win here. All you got to do is do a couple clicks and we'll be square. And I thank you for your time, and that you chose to spend it with me and the Cleric's Challenge. And now that we dear friends are soon to part, I wish you nothing but the best.